To start off this video, we actually have a very wholesome entry. The Grinch of Gloucester mystery has become a heartwarming topic in recent years. It involves an anonymous individual or group dressed as the Grinch, but instead of making the holiday worse, they actually go around leaving presents at people's doorsteps. The mystery began gaining attention in Gloucester, specifically in the suburb of Cooper's Edge, Brockworth. According to ITV News, the Grinch figure was first reported in December 2020, during the pandemic. The mysterious figure, dressed as the Grinch from Dr. Seuss's How the Grinch Stole Christmas, was caught on CCTV delivering gifts to homes. The presents are often accompanied by notes with quotes from the classic Dr. Seuss story. One such note read, "Maybe Christmas doesn't come from a store. Maybe Christmas perhaps means a little bit more." The reaction from the community has been overwhelmingly positive. Residents of Cooper's Edge have expressed their appreciation for these anonymous acts of kindness. Despite the widespread attention and speculation, the identity of the Grinch of Gloucester remains unknown. But this anonymity is what gives the mystery its charm and allure. It pushes the focus on the actual acts of kindness rather than the actual person behind them. Residents have speculated various identities, from local philanthropists to community groups, but no concrete evidence has emerged. On April 19, 1995, a massive explosion went off in the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building in Oklahoma City. This was an act of domestic terrorism, executed by Timothy McVeigh and his accomplice Terry Nichols. It resulted in the deaths of 168 people, including 19 children, and injured over 600 others. The bombing was a deliberate attack on the federal government, driven by McVeigh's anti-government ideology. Timothy McVeigh was born on April 23, 1968, in Lockport, New York. He grew up in a working-class family and developed a strong distrust of the federal government, fueled by his experiences in the military and influenced by events such as the Ruby Ridge incident in 1992 and the Waco siege in 1993. On the morning of April 19th, specifically at 9:02 a.m., McVeigh parked a Ryder truck in front of the Murrah building and lit a timed fuse. He then walked away to a getaway car he had pre-parked a few blocks away. The following explosion reduced much of the building to rubble and caused extensive damage to surrounding structures. McVeigh was apprehended just 90 minutes after the bombing during a routine traffic stop for driving without a license plate. He was found to be in possession of a concealed weapon. His arrest and subsequent investigation quickly linked him to the bombing. Amidst the chaotic aftermath of the Oklahoma City bombing, rescuers and investigators sifted through the debris of the building. Among the numerous body parts and remains recovered was a severed left leg, discovered relatively early in the recovery process. Initially, this leg was assumed to belong to one of the victims of the bombing, given the extensive destruction and the numerous casualties. The leg was sent for forensic examination, where it underwent DNA testing and analysis. The forensic team hoped to match the leg with one of the known victims by comparing the DNA to the profiles of the deceased. Surprisingly, the leg did not match the DNA of any identified victim, leading to the realization that it belonged to an unidentified individual. It was later revealed that the leg had been embalmed, which suggested that it might have come from a body that had already been prepared for burial. Embalming involves the use of chemicals that can degrade DNA, making genetic analysis difficult. Despite retesting and reevaluation over the years, the leg did not match any of the missing parts from the identified victims. Again, one theory is that the leg might have belonged to someone who had died before the bombing and whose remains somehow ended up at the site. This theory stems from the leg being embalmed, which typically suggests that the body had been prepared for burial at some point before the bombing. However, there is no direct evidence supporting this idea, and it remains purely speculative. Critics of this theory argue that it is unlikely for a pre-existing corpse to end up at the site of a bombing without leaving any other traceable evidence or connections. Another plausible theory is that the leg belonged to an undocumented or unreported victim who was present at the site during the bombing. Given the chaotic nature of the bombing and the extensive destruction, it is possible that there could have been individuals in or near the building who were not officially recorded or accounted for. Others speculate that the leg could be linked to a criminal case or a missing person unrelated to the bombing. This theory suggests that the leg might have been part of an earlier crime scene or was intentionally placed at the bombing site for unknown reasons. This next entry involves the discovery of mass graves at Old Swan. These graves are specifically associated with the demolition of St. Oswald's Primary School in the 1970s. St. Oswald's Church, designed by Augustus Welby Pugin and opened in 1842, is known as the first Catholic church in the north of England since the Reformation to feature a tower and spire. The church was central to the Catholic community in Old Swan, Liverpool, and its associated buildings played an important role in the area's social and educational life. Amongst these buildings was St. Oswald's Primary School. The school served the local community for many years before redevelopment plans in the 1970s led to its demolition. It was during this demolition that the graves were discovered. During the fall season of 1973, construction workers began excavating land next to St. Oswald's Church for the foundations of new infant and junior schools. The parish priest at the time, Father McCartney, had a vague idea that unmarked graves might exist in the area, but didn't expect it to be a massive deal. If anything, this was more of a legend than a fact. Workers unearthed numerous coffins, buried up to 16 deep in some places, within an area of about 40 square yards. The discovery of over 3,500 coffins, buried in such a systematic manner, shocked everyone and raised numerous questions. Local authorities, including the Liverpool City Coroner and the Home Office, quickly became involved. The site was secured with a high fence to prevent public access, and the exhumation was conducted under strict supervision. The swift governmental response, including the imposition of a D notice to prevent press coverage and the immediate cremation of the remains, fueled speculation about a cover-up. The graves were found to contain not only adults but also children. Understandably, tons of people came forward with their theories as to the origins of these burials. One of the most plausible theories is that the graves contained victims of 19th century epidemics, such as cholera, typhoid, or dysentery, which were common in densely populated urban areas like Liverpool. The coffins were neatly arranged and buried up to 16 deep, suggesting a systematic and organized burial process rather than the chaotic interments typical of plague pits. This indicates that the burials were managed with care, likely during a health crisis when the need to bury the dead quickly yet respectfully was mandatory. Liverpool experienced several epidemics in the 19th century. Cholera outbreaks, for example, were particularly severe in 1832, 1849, and 1866. Another theory posits that the graves belong to Irish migrants who fled the Great Potato Famine, which took place from 1845 to 1852 and later died in Liverpool due to disease and poor living conditions. During the mid-19th century, Liverpool saw a massive influx of Irish immigrants escaping the famine. Many of these migrants settled in impoverished areas and succumbed to various diseases. The burials predate many detailed records, aligning with the time frame when these migrants would have arrived and died in large numbers without extensive documentation. And the third most popular theory is the government cover-up. Again, the government responded rapidly and immediately cut off the gravesite from the public. They didn't even allow any extensive media coverage. Their order to cremate all of the remains also leads many to believe they were trying to hide something. The 1970s carried increased tensions between Britain and Irish nationalists, with frequent terrorist activities related to the Troubles in Northern Ireland. Acknowledging historical mistreatment of Irish migrants could have exacerbated these tensions. Some locals and historians speculate that the graves could be linked to a darker chapter of British-Irish history, possibly involving mistreatment or even mass violence against Irish migrants. However, this theory largely remains speculative. Leah Toby Roberts was born on July 23, 1976 in Durham, North Carolina. She was the youngest of 3 children and grew up in a loving, supportive family. Leah's childhood and early years are said to be normal and mundane. Her family described her as a bright, creative, and free-spirited individual with a love for adventure. Leah also had a great relationship with her parents, Nancy and Stancil, as well as her siblings, Kara and Heath. The Roberts family was considered tight-knit and deeply connected. Leah excelled in school from the very start and ended up attending North Carolina State University to major in Spanish and anthropology. While at NCSU, Leah's love for literature and travel really began to thrive. Jack Kerouac's novel Dharma Bums resonated deeply with Leah, reflecting her own desires for spiritual exploration and a deeper understanding of life's mysteries. This fascination with Kerouac's work would later play a pivotal role in her decision to embark on a journey to the Pacific Northwest. So far, Leah's life sounds pretty good, but that's not to say that she didn't face any tragedies at all. Leah's life took a dramatic turn when these tragedies were introduced. In 1997, which happened to be Leah's sophomore year in college, her mother passed away suddenly due to heart disease. This loss was devastating for Leah, who had been very close to her mother. Then, during the fall of 1998, Leah was involved in a near-fatal car accident. The accident resulted in significant physical injuries, including a broken femur that required surgical insertion of a metal rod. This traumatic event not only left her with physical scars, but also intensified her introspective nature and her quest for a deeper understanding of life and its purpose. Just 2 years after losing her mother in 1999, Leah's father succumbed to chronic lung disease. The loss of both parents in such a short span led her to seek solace and meaning in her life through travel and spiritual exploration. In early 2000, she made the difficult decision to drop out of college during her senior year. She felt that she needed time to heal and find herself. She spent much of her time at a coffee house in Durham named Cuppo Joe, where she wrote poetry, journaled, and immersed herself in the works of her favorite writers. This period of her life was marked by a sense of restlessness and a yearning for something more. Leah's friends and family noticed changes in her behavior during this time. She became more withdrawn. She expressed a particular interest in the Pacific Northwest, inspired by Kerouac's descriptions of the area. Leah's fascination with Kerouac's journey and her own need for a spiritual awakening fueled her decision to set out on an unplanned road trip. On March 9, 2000, she made the decision to leave her home in Durham, North Carolina without informing her friends or family of her specific plans. Leah left a note for her roommate, Nicole Bennett, explaining her intentions. In the note, she stated that she was not suicidal but needed time to explore and understand herself. Leah's preparations for the trip included withdrawing a substantial amount of money from her bank account. She left behind enough cash to cover her share of the rent and other expenses, suggesting that she intended to be away for an extended period. Leah also packed her white 1993 Jeep Cherokee with personal belongings that would sustain her during her travels. Among the items she took were clothes, books, a journal, her guitar, and her kitten Bee. Her exact route was not known, but bank records and surveillance footage provided clues about her movements. Leah's bank records showed that she made several transactions along the way, including gas and food purchases, which helped investigators trace her path. One of the critical pieces of evidence in tracing Leah's journey was a receipt for a fuel purchase in Brooks, Oregon, dated March 13, 2000. Surveillance footage from the gas station confirmed Leah's presence there, showing her alone and in good spirits. The footage also revealed her peering outside several times, suggesting that she might have been aware of someone or something outside, although no one else was visible in the footage. Leah continued her journey northward, and by the afternoon of March 13th, she had reached Bellingham, Washington. A ticket stub for the movie American Beauty, purchased at the Bellis Fair Mall in Bellingham, provided evidence of her presence in the area. The ticket was time-stamped 2:10 p.m., indicating that Leah had spent some time in Bellingham before her disappearance. On the morning of March 18th, 2000, a couple jogging along Canyon Creek Road, a remote area off the Mount Baker Highway in Whatcom County, Washington, noticed unusual items near the roadside. Articles of clothing were scattered along the side of the road, and some pieces had been tied to trees and branches. As they investigated further, they discovered a severely damaged white 1993 Jeep Cherokee at the bottom of a steep embankment. The couple immediately reported their findings to the local authorities. When the police arrived, they traced the vehicle's registration and confirmed that it belonged to Leah Roberts, who had been reported missing by her family. The Jeep's discovery was about 30 miles east of Bellingham, Washington, in a densely forested and remote area, which made the circumstances even more puzzling. The vehicle was found in a state of severe disrepair, having apparently rolled down the embankment at high speed. Investigators from the Washington State Patrol analyzed the scene and determined that the vehicle had been traveling at nearly 40 miles per hour when it left the road and crashed through the trees. The vehicle's contents were scattered inside, which supported the idea of a multiple rollover accident. However, there were several details that suggested something more than just an accident. Despite the severity of the crash, there were no signs of blood or physical injury inside the vehicle. The lack of blood, broken glass, or stretched seatbelts indicated that no one might have been inside the Jeep when it crashed. This led investigators to theorize that the accident could have been staged. Several personal items belonging to Leah were found both inside and around the vehicle. These items included her driver's license, clothes, guitar, compact discs, and a checkbook. Notably, a substantial amount of cash, approximately $2,400, was found tucked inside a pair of her pants, suggesting that robbery was not the motive. Leah's passport and various other belongings were also discovered, indicating that she had taken these items with her on her journey. One of the more poignant discoveries was the presence of Leah's mother's engagement ring, which was found inside the vehicle. Leah rarely took off this ring. Additionally, blankets and pillows had been placed over the broken windows of the Jeep, indicating that someone might have used the vehicle as a shelter after the crash. Bits of cat food and an empty cat carrier were also found in the Jeep. However, there was no sign of the kitten at the crash site. As the investigation progressed, a critical piece of evidence was discovered. A wire under the Jeep's hood had been deliberately cut. This tampering allowed the vehicle to accelerate without someone pressing the gas pedal. This further supported the possibility that the crash was orchestrated to look like an accident. The discovery of this tampering raised suspicions of foul play and led investigators to consider the possibility that someone with mechanical knowledge had been involved. An unidentified fingerprint was recovered from under the hood of the Jeep, and male DNA was found on a piece of Leah's clothing. These findings pointed towards the involvement of another person, but despite extensive efforts, the fingerprint and DNA did not match any known suspects or persons of interest in the case. Following the discovery of the Jeep, extensive search efforts were launched in the surrounding area. Search and rescue teams, including dogs trained to detect human scent and cadavers, scoured the dense forest around Canyon Creek Road. Helicopters and ground personnel covered a wide area, mapping out potential routes Leah could have taken if she had wandered away from the crash site. Despite these thorough efforts, no trace of Leah was found. The search efforts were based on the assumption that Leah might have been injured or disoriented following the crash. However, the lack of any physical evidence of her presence, such as blood or personal items beyond those already discovered, left investigators with more questions than answers. In the days following the discovery of the vehicle, investigators received several tips and potential leads. One particularly intriguing lead came from an anonymous caller who reported seeing a woman matching Leah's description at a Texaco gas station in Everett, Washington, approximately 30 miles from the crash site. The caller stated that the woman appeared disoriented and confused. However, the call ended abruptly before more details could be gathered, and the tip remained unverified. Despite this and other leads, none provided concrete evidence or clear directions for the investigation. Leah's family continued to search for her, distributing flyers and reaching out to local businesses and residents in the hope that someone might have seen her. Over the years, many theories have popped up to explain Leah's disappearance. These theories range from accidental death to voluntary disappearance and foul play. One of the initial theories considered by investigators was that Leah Roberts may have died accidentally after her Jeep Cherokee crashed off the remote logging road near Mount Baker Highway. Given the severe damage to the vehicle and the rough terrain, it's plausible that Leah could have been injured or disoriented following the crash and wandered into the wilderness, where she succumbed to the elements. The crash site was in a remote forested area, making it difficult for an injured person to navigate or seek help. The dense forest and rugged terrain would pose significant challenges for someone trying to find their way back to civilization. Despite extensive search efforts, including the use of search dogs and helicopters, no trace of Leah was found in the immediate vicinity of the crash site. This could imply that she ventured further into the wilderness than search teams could cover. Those who disagree with this theory point out that there is a lack of physical evidence to suggest that Leah was in distress immediately after the accident. They also point to the suspicious fact that a wire under the hood of the vehicle was cut. Another popular theory suggests a voluntary disappearance. This would have been done in order to start a new life. We all know that Leah liked to get in touch with her spiritual side, and such an accident may have been her way of quote-unquote killing off her old self and starting anew. However, many point out that Leah left behind her mother's ring, highlighting that Leah actually planned to return. Then the third and probably most popular theory is foul play. As we have discussed, the tampering with the wire is highly suspicious and strongly suggests that the accident was staged. The presence of male DNA on Leah's clothing and an unidentified fingerprint under the hood of the Jeep indicates that another person might have been involved. Despite extensive investigations, these forensic clues have not matched any known suspects. The sighting of a disoriented woman matching Leah's description at a gas station shortly after the crash suggests that she might have encountered someone who caused her harm or coerced her. The abrupt end to the anonymous tipster's call raises further suspicions about the validity of the sighting and the potential involvement of a third party. Aside from these three, there's another theory that is less popular, that being psychological breakdown. Friends and family noted changes in Leah's behavior leading up to her disappearance. She was a lot more reserved and often talked to herself out in public, and that detail I mentioned earlier about a woman appearing to be disoriented could also support this idea. John Weeks is the name of a man who disappeared in June 1997 in Grand Rapids, Michigan. According to officials, John worked as a handyman for a 43-year-old man named Marvin Gabriel. Marvin is a scumbag, having been convicted of murder and rape. However, he is suspected of being responsible for several other unsolved disappearances. Marvin was sentenced to death in 2002, but is still alive currently at the age of 70. The most recent update I could find on him stated that he was being held in a medical center for federal prisoners in Springfield, Missouri. Now, in order to better understand John's case, I first need to dive a bit into the case where Marvin was convicted of rape and murder. On August 7th, 1996, Gabriel met an 18-year-old named Rachel Timmerman. The two were attending a party late at night, and after striking up a conversation, Marvin left the party with her as well as two other men. The group left in a car and Marvin drove up to a large field where he kicked out the other two men. At this point, Rachel wasn't really suspecting anything, but after driving off a bit further, Marvin stopped and began beating Rachel. After she was too weak to further defend herself, Marvin raped her 3 times throughout the night. Rachel informed her mother about the violence she faced, but was scared to report Marvin to the police. The reason for this was that Marvin told her that if she did tell the police, he would kill not only her, but her infant daughter as well. However, she did ultimately muster up the courage to inform law enforcement. Police then investigated the case for approximately 6 months before arresting Marvin in January of 1997. He was charged with the rape of Rachel Timmerman. But just 2 weeks after being arrested, Marvin was released on bail. Understandably, Rachel was completely traumatized by what she went through, so as time passed and the time came for her to testify against Marvin in a preliminary hearing got closer, her fear started to increase again. Rachel had informed her friends and family that Marvin had made threats against her several times already. Fast forward to June 3rd, 1997, Rachel told her parents that she was going on a date with a man and would be bringing along her daughter. In fact, it was this man's idea to bring Rachel's daughter with them. Her parents said that this was great and expected her to come back home later that day, but she never did. The very next day, Rachel's father received a letter that was apparently from Rachel herself. In it, she said that she was going to be going on vacation. This was incredibly suspicious, as she was supposed to testify against Marvin the day after. So when that time came around, Rachel was nowhere to be seen. Then, about 2 weeks after Marvin's preliminary hearing, the case's prosecutor received a letter from Rachel. In the letter, Rachel stated that she was the one who wanted to have sex with Marvin, but after consistently refusing her advances, she threatened to tell police that he raped her. This letter was apparently sent from Little Rock, Arkansas. Now, fast forward again to July 5th. The lifeless body of a woman was found in Oxford Lake, Michigan, and could you take a wild guess as to who the body belonged to? Rachel Timmerman. Her body was covered in chains that were connected to large blocks of cement. Additionally, someone had covered her mouth and eyes with duct tape. Medical officials later reported that her official cause of death was drowning. Of course, everyone immediately suspected Marvin of being responsible, and this is where we start to branch out. There was another suspicious incident involving a man who had connections to Marvin who went missing. This man's name was Wayne Davis, and he was actually one of the two friends that Marvin kicked out of the car back on the night when he Rachel. According to officials, Wayne had also agreed to testify against Marvin during his hearing, but went missing shortly after making this decision. This is where John Weeks comes in. John is supposedly the man who asked Rachel out on that date. John's girlfriend told police that she caught him on the phone at a weird time. When she asked him who was on the other end, John replied that he was going to visit Texas with a friend. She suspected that this friend was actually Marvin, so when John failed to return home for an extended period, she called Marvin asking where John was. Marvin told her that he actually left John in Arizona, so as investigators went through all of these cases and tied them together, they realized that Marvin was actually using someone else's identity for a time. This identity was Robert Allen, who was reported missing in 1995. In late 1997, Marvin was arrested for cashing social security checks under the name Robert Allen. In court, he denied being Marvin Gabriel and was adamant that he was this man named Robert Allen. But ultimately, his identity as Marvin Gabriel was confirmed. This is one of those cases where everyone is 99% sure they know who is responsible, but because of a lack of evidence, they aren't able to actually do anything in certain areas. But in 2002, along with the conviction of Rachel's murder, Marvin was also found guilty of Wayne Davis' murder, when his body was found under similar circumstances to Rachel. To this day, the remains of Rachel's daughter Shannon, John Weeks, and Robert Allen are still missing. Starlite is an intumescent material that Maurice Ward, a British hairdresser and amateur chemist, claimed could withstand extreme temperatures up to 10,000 degrees Celsius without burning, melting, or producing toxic fumes. Its potential applications span aerospace, military, and fire protection, making it a highly sought-after material. Maurice began developing Starlite in response to the 1985 British Air Tour's Flight 28M disaster, where a fire resulted in the deaths of 55 people due to smoke inhalation. This event inspired him to create a material that could withstand intense heat and potentially save lives in similar situations. Ward, who had no formal scientific training, conducted his experiments in his backyard. Through trial and error, he stumbled upon a mixture that resisted burning, leading to the development of Starlite. The material first gained public attention through television demonstrations. In 1990, the BBC program Tomorrow's World showcased an experiment where an egg coated with Starlite was blasted with a blowtorch flame. Despite the intense heat, the egg remained intact and its yolk stayed raw. These demonstrations impressed audiences and attracted the interest of major organizations such as NASA, Boeing, and the British military. Starlite underwent various tests by reputable organizations to verify its properties. The British Atomic Weapons Establishment tested Starlite-coated cables and found them impervious to temperatures of 10,000 degrees Celsius, similar to a nuclear flash. NASA conducted tests at the White Sands Missile Range where Starlite-lined eggs withstood both simulated nuclear flashes and a full-scale nuclear explosion. However, Ward was reluctant to share specific information regarding the material's composition, which greatly hindered its commercial development. In fact, Ward was notorious for how secretive he was about keeping the composition of Starlite secret. He only revealed that it was a mixture of 21 polymers and copolymers along with some ceramic materials. He feared that if given to the wrong people, the material would be misused. So in the year 2011, Maurice Ward died, taking the secrets of Starlite with him. Following Ward's death, various scientists and enthusiasts attempted to replicate Starlite. Students at UC Merced, for example, spent a semester trying to recreate the material based on available information and public demonstrations. However, replicating Starlite's exact properties proved to be a significant challenge. Several online communities and amateur chemists also experimented with potential formulations, using ingredients like cornstarch, baking soda, and PVA glue. While some managed to replicate certain aspects of Starlite's behavior, none could fully match the original material's performance. Dana Nicole Bradley was born in 1967 in St. John's, Newfoundland and Labrador, Canada. By all accounts, she was a typical 14-year-old girl who grew up in the early 1980s and was known for her friendly demeanor and vibrant personality. Dana lived with her mother and stepfather in St. John's, attending a local school where she was a well-liked student. She was known to be outgoing and sociable. Like many teenagers in her community at the time, Dana frequently practiced hitchhiking. While today we may view the concept of a 14-year-old hitchhiking around as dangerous, we have to keep in mind that these were different times. The relative safety of the community and the trusting nature of its residents meant that hitchhiking was often seen as a normal way for young people to get around. On Monday, December 14th, 1981, 14-year-old Dana Nicole Bradley began what seemed like an ordinary day. This day held special significance for the Bradley family as it was Dana's mother's birthday and a celebration was planned for that evening. Dana attended her classes at the local school, going through her regular routine. As the school day came to an end around 2:50 p.m., she left the building with her friends. Instead of heading directly home, Dana and some friends made their way to a nearby convenience store, which was a semi-regular detour they made. After spending some time with her friends at the store, Dana decided to visit her close friend Penny. Dana was mindful of the time due to her mother's birthday celebration. She knew she couldn't stay long at Penny's house if she wanted to make it home in time for the family gathering. At approximately 5 p.m., Dana made a phone call to her family. She informed them that she was leaving Penny's house and expected to be home in about 30 minutes. This call would later become a critical piece of information for investigators as it established a timeline for Dana's movements. Dana's plan was to walk from Penny's house to a nearby bus stop on Topsail Road. Topsail Road was and still is a major thoroughfare in St. John's, connecting the city center with outlying areas. The bus stop Dana was heading to was a frequently used location by residents. What happened next has been pieced together from eyewitness accounts, primarily from two brothers who were on a work break at the time. According to their statements, they observed Dana at the bus stop on Topsail Road. What caught their attention was that Dana appeared to be hitchhiking. They reported seeing her get into a car that pulled up to the bus stop. They described it as a light-colored car, a mid-1970s Dodge Dart or Plymouth Valiant. Both of these models were said to be popular at the time. What stood out about the car, according to the witnesses, was its condition. They noted significant rust damage, which was not uncommon for vehicles in Newfoundland due to the harsh coastal climate and salt used on winter roads. More distinctively, they observed that the car had a broken driver's side door. This detail would later become a key point of focus for investigators as they tried to locate the vehicle. The brothers were able to provide a general description of the driver, identifying him as a man. However, they were unable to get a clear look at his face or note any distinguishing features. Additionally, not expecting this situation to unfold the way it did, they did not take note of the car's license plate number. As 5:30 p.m. came and went with no sign of Dana, her family began to worry. Her mother and her stepfather started to feel uneasy about Dana's absence, initially attributed the delay to normal teenage behavior or perhaps a missed bus. However, as time passed and darkness fell, their concern grew. The family began by making phone calls to Dana's friends, including Penny, whom she had visited earlier. When these calls yielded no information about Dana's whereabouts, the family's worry escalated to all-out alarm. They expanded their efforts, reaching out to other acquaintances and checking places Dana might have gone. They began searching the neighborhood, driving along routes Dana might have taken, and checking areas she was known to frequent. The growing darkness and the cold December weather added to the urgency of their search. It's worth noting that in 1981, the procedures for reporting and responding to cases of missing persons, especially involving teenagers, were not as developed or immediate as they are today. There was often an assumption that a missing teenager probably just ran out to have fun, and thus they were not in any danger. This is essentially how Dana's case was treated initially, but once her parents pushed back a bit harder, informing investigators that Dana had never been gone for this long, officials finally started their own investigation and search. By the next morning, December 15th, a full-scale missing person investigation was underway. The RCMP, who had jurisdiction in the area, took charge of the case. They began by interviewing Dana's family, friends, and the eyewitnesses who had last seen her. One of the first steps in the investigation was to widely publicize Dana's description and the clothes she was last seen wearing. She was reported to be wearing cowboy boots and blue pants on the day of her disappearance. A composite sketch of the man last seen with Dana was created based on the limited description provided by the witnesses and was distributed to the public. The community of St. John's quickly rallied around the Bradley family. Volunteers joined in the search efforts, combing areas around Topsail Road and expanding outward. Local media played a crucial role in spreading awareness about Dana's disappearance with regular updates and appeals for information. As the days passed without any sign of Dana, the investigation intensified. The RCMP set up a dedicated task force for the case, allocating significant resources to follow up on every single lead. They began the arduous process of checking every vehicle in the area that matched the description provided by the witnesses, which was a very tall task given the popularity of the Dodge Dart and Plymouth Valiant models. On December 18, 1981, 4 days after Dana's disappearance, the search came to a tragic end. Dale Smith, a local resident who had been searching for a Christmas tree in a wooded area near Maddox Cove, made a grim discovery. Maddox Cove is a small community located approximately 10 kilometers south of St. John's. Dana's body was found off Maddox Cove Road in a secluded wooded location not easily visible from the road. Smith, upon realizing what he had found, immediately contacted the authorities. The RCMP quickly cordoned off the area and established a perimeter to begin the investigation of the crime scene. The discovery of Dana's body transformed the missing person case into a homicide investigation. Every square inch of the ground was scrutinized for potential evidence. Investigators used the grid patterns to systematically search the area, collecting leaf litter, soil samples, and any items that seemed out of place. One of the most disturbing details of the crime scene was the position in which Dana's body was found. She was laid out in what investigators described as a burial fashion, with her schoolbooks carefully tucked under her arm. This detail would become a significant point of focus in the investigation, as it suggested a level of care or ritual that seemed at odds with the violent nature of the crime. Forensic experts carefully documented the position of the body and collected trace evidence from Dana's clothing and the surrounding area. They looked for fibers, hair, or any other materials that might provide clues about the perpetrator or the location where Dana had been held before her death. The medical examiner conducted a preliminary examination at the scene before the body was carefully removed and transported for a full autopsy. The autopsy revealed several disheartening details. Dana had been assaulted and died from blunt force trauma to her skull. The medical examiner was able to estimate the time of death, placing it likely within hours of her disappearance on December 14th. The autopsy also provided valuable forensic evidence. Officials collected traces of foreign DNA from Dana's body. However, this DNA would not be of significant use for many years. Investigators re-interviewed witnesses, particularly focusing on the brothers who had last seen Dana getting into the car. The search for the vehicle intensified. Auto shops were revisited and records were scrutinized for any repairs that might match damage to the suspect vehicle. As the investigation progressed, the RCMP began to develop a profile of the potential suspect. Based on the nature of the crime and the evidence at hand, they believed they were looking for a man between 20 and 40 years of age who was familiar with not only St. John's but the remote location where Dana was discovered as well. Investigators were confident that the killer was a local resident. They believed that the culprit may have a history of and violent crimes. In 1986, 5 years after Dana's murder, the investigation took a dramatic turn when David Grant Somerton confessed to the crime. Somerton provided details about the murder that seemed to match the evidence, including information about the murder weapon and the location where the body was found. Based on this confession, Somerton was charged with first-degree murder. However, the case against him quickly began to unravel. He later recanted his confession, claiming that police had coerced him into falsely confessing. There was also no physical evidence that could link Somerton to the crime scene or to Dana. Additionally, Somerton's stories had a significant amount of inconsistencies with the officials' information. Eventually, the charges against Somerton were stayed due to lack of evidence. He was later convicted of public mischief for the false confession. After the Somerton confession was discredited, the Dana Bradley case entered a period of relative inactivity. While it was never officially closed, the lack of new leads meant that it effectively became a cold case. One of the most significant developments in the case came in 2016, 35 years after Dana's murder. The RCMP announced that they had obtained new DNA evidence connecting the homicide to an unknown male suspect. This breakthrough was the result of advances in DNA technology that allowed for more sensitive analysis of trace evidence. The RCMP resubmitted various pieces of evidence from the crime scene for testing using these new techniques. However, they have yet to publicly announce any new updates. The Yosemite Sam number station is a phenomenon that intrigued amateur radio enthusiasts and conspiracy theorists alike from its first broadcast in December 2004 until its sudden end in February 2005. This mysterious shortwave radio station was characterized by its unusual broadcasts, featuring a distinctive audio clip from a Warner Brothers cartoon character, Yosemite Sam. The Yosemite Sam number station's broadcasts were distinct and easily recognizable, primarily due to the inclusion of a famous line from the cartoon character Yosemite Sam. Each transmission began with a brief data burst, followed by Yosemite Sam's voice exclaiming, "Varmint, I'm gonna blow you to smithereens," and ending with the sound of an explosion. This audio clip was taken from the 1950 cartoon Bunker Hill Bunny, where Yosemite Sam is an explosive and belligerent character. The broadcasts occurred at precise intervals and on multiple shortwave frequencies. Specifically, the transmissions were reported on 3700, 4300, 6500, and 10,500 kHz. These frequencies were chosen strategically, allowing the signal to propagate over various distances and conditions. Each broadcast began exactly 7 seconds after the top of the hour and was repeated sequentially on each frequency, with the entire cycle lasting precisely 2 minutes. Efforts to locate the source of these broadcasts led amateur radio enthusiasts to speculate that the signals originated from the southwestern United States, particularly near Albuquerque, New Mexico. Detailed triangulation and investigation pointed to the Mobility Assessment Test and Integration Center on the Laguna Pueblo Reservation as a likely transmission site. This facility, owned by military contractor Laguna Industries, was used for testing communication equipment and conducting radio frequency experiments. One of the more popular theories is that the broadcasts were part of a military testing or calibration program. The regularity and precision of the transmissions, coupled with the sophisticated technology required to broadcast on multiple frequencies, suggest an organized and structured operation. The Matic facility's involvement in testing communication systems and battlefield conditions further supports this theory. Another popular theory, albeit a bit sensationalized, is that the Yosemite Sam number station was used for covert communications, akin to other number stations historically employed by intelligence agencies. The seemingly nonsensical audio clip and data burst could have contained hidden messages or codes intended for clandestine recipients. The use of number stations for espionage purposes has a long history, with these broadcasts serving as a secure method of transmitting information to agents in the field. Others believe that the station was an elaborate hoax or an experimental broadcast orchestrated by an unknown individual or group. The playful nature of the Yosemite Sam clip lends some credence to this theory, though the complexity and resources required to maintain such a broadcast suggest otherwise. Additionally, the sudden and precise cessation of broadcast when investigators approach the suspected transmission site indicates a level of sophistication beyond that of a mere prank. So this entry basically says it all in the name. There are people in North Carolina claiming to have seen flying dinosaurs, specifically pterosaurs. Reports of prehistoric-like creatures have been increasing with detailed accounts from eyewitnesses. Jonathan Whitcomb, a prominent cryptozoologist, has been at the forefront of investigating these sightings. Whitcomb has documented numerous reports from various parts of North Carolina, as well as other locations globally. His work primarily revolves around collecting eyewitness testimonies, analyzing their descriptions, and comparing them with known characteristics characteristics of pterosaurs. Wickham and his associates believe that these creatures are not extinct, but rather surviving members of the pterosaur family, commonly referred to as pterodactyls or flying dinosaurs. One woman in Raleigh, North Carolina, gave the following description when interviewed about her sighting. She reported seeing a large, featherless creature with a long tail ending in a diamond-shaped bulb and a head crest. She spotted this creature twice, once in January 2018 and again after a snowfall while commuting to work in an Uber. This is just one account, but there are actually a few dozen, if not more, in North Carolina alone. Skeptics often attribute these sightings to misidentifications of large birds such as herons or pelicans. Others suggest the possibility of hoaxes or exaggerated accounts influenced by popular media depictions of dinosaurs. Matt Cartmill, a professor emeritus of evolutionary anthropology at Duke University, argues that the lack of physical evidence, such as a captured specimen, makes the existence of living pterosaurs highly unlikely. This mystery is actually very popular, so I'm surprised to see it here in the fifth layer, but nevertheless it's a very sad case. It focuses on two young women named Kris Kremers and Lisanne Froon. Kris Kremers was born on August 9, 1992 in Amersfoort, Netherlands. She was described by her family and friends as an intelligent, responsible, and creative individual. Kris had a keen interest in art, photography, and theater. She was known for her adventurous spirit and strong sense of responsibility. Kris had recently completed her studies in cultural social education, specializing in art education, and was exploring various career options, including teaching and working with children. Lisanne Froon was born on September 24, 1991, also in Amersfoort. Lisanne was described as an optimistic, athletic, and intelligent young woman. She had a passion for volleyball and enjoyed being active outdoors. Lisanne had just graduated with a degree in applied psychology and was eager to gain more life experience and improve her Spanish before starting her professional career. She was known for her positive outlook and determination to achieve her goals. The two young women had been friends for several years. They shared common interests and aspirations, which led them to plan an adventurous trip together. Both were eager to experience new cultures, volunteer, and learn a new language, making Panama an ideal destination for their post-graduation adventure. In mid-March 2014, Kris and Lisanne embarked on their journey to Panama. They aimed to spend about 6 weeks in the country, exploring and volunteering. Their schedule included a mix of sightseeing, hiking, and volunteering at local organizations, particularly with children. Upon arrival in Panama, they traveled to Boquete, a small town known for its picturesque landscapes, cloud forests, and popular hiking trails. Boquete is located in the western part of Panama near the border with Costa Rica, and is a popular destination for tourists seeking outdoor activities. The duo arrived in Boquete in late March and settled into their accommodations with a local host family. They quickly immersed themselves in the local culture, spending their days exploring the town, socializing with other travelers, and preparing for their volunteer work. The two were enthusiastic about their upcoming activities and looked forward to making a positive impact through their volunteer efforts. They planned to start volunteering on April 1st, 2014. However, due to a scheduling mix-up, their volunteering start date was delayed by a day. With an unexpected free day, Kris and Lisanne decided to take advantage of the extra time by exploring the local area. They chose to hike the Pianista Trail, which was a well-known route leading through the cloud forest and offering amazing views of the Continental Divide. However, the trail is also well known for its rough terrain and frequent changes in weather. The trail begins near Boquete and goes through dense cloud forests, eventually leading to a viewpoint at the Continental Divide. From there, the trail continues into more remote and less traveled areas. Despite its popularity, the trail can be dangerous for those who don't properly prepare for it. On the morning of April 1st, Kris and Lisanne set out for their hike. They were seen having brunch with two Dutch men before beginning their trek. They left their host family's home around 11 a.m. carrying minimal supplies. This included light clothing, a single backpack, their phones, and a camera. This casual approach suggests they intended it to be a short hike and likely planned to return by late afternoon. As the day progressed and the women failed to return, their host family grew concerned. By the next day, April 2nd, when the two women had still not returned, local authorities were notified. An initial search was launched, focusing on the Pianista Trail and surrounding areas, but it yielded no immediate results. The search for Kris and Lisanne quickly intensified, involving local police, volunteers, and specialized search teams from the Netherlands. Helicopters, dogs, and ground teams combed the area, but the dense jungle and challenging terrain complicated the search. It quickly expanded to cover various potential routes the women could have taken, but days passed with no sign of the missing hikers. Soon, Dutch authorities became involved, providing additional resources. They worked alongside Panamanian officials, utilizing technology and manpower to scour the region. Despite the extensive search efforts, weeks went by without any significant leads. Back in the Netherlands, the disappearance of the women gained widespread media attention. Their families were actively involved in the search, traveling to Panama to assist. The Dutch community, both in the Netherlands and abroad, rallied in support, raising awareness and funds to aid the search operations. Posters, social media campaigns, and news reports kept the public informed and engaged in the ongoing efforts to find the two women. On April 1st, 2014, the morning of their hike, there were no indications that anything was amiss. Kris and Lisanne were seen leaving their host family's home, dressed for a day hike and carrying a backpack with essential items. Fast forward to June 14th of the same year, a major discovery is finally made in the case. A local Ngabe woman found a blue backpack by the banks of the Colubre River near the village of Alto Romero, approximately 8 kilometers from the Pianista Trail. The woman reported that she had come across the backpack while tending to her rice paddy along the riverbank. Oddly enough, the backpack was found in a location that had been searched before, raising questions about how and when it ended up there. The backpack was in good condition, appearing dry and undamaged despite the harsh weather conditions that had occurred during the weeks that followed the pair's disappearance. This led to speculation that it might not have been there the entire time since the disappearance, or that it had been somehow protected from the elements. Inside the backpack, authorities found several items belonging to the missing women, including 2 pairs of sunglasses, about $80, Lisanne's passport, a water bottle, 2 bras, both of their phones, and Lisanne's camera, and it's within the phones where a lot of crucial information is revealed. Within Kris's phone, it was discovered that an emergency call was made on April 1st at 4:39 p.m. This would have been just hours after their hike had started, and over the next few days, additional phone calls to emergency services were made. The iPhone showed that it was intermittently turned on to check for a signal. On April 6th, the phone was turned on at 10:26 a.m. and again at 1:37 p.m., but by then, the correct password was never entered, suggesting that the person trying to use the phone did not know the code. Inside Lisanne's phone, officials found her first attempt at calling for help being made at 4:51 p.m. Just like Kris, Lisanne made more failed calls afterward. The last recorded activity was on April 5th when the phone battery died around 5 a.m. The camera found in the backpack contained over 90 photos. The initial photos showed Kris and Lisanne on the Pianista Trail, smiling and enjoying the hike. They appeared to be in good spirits, with the last of these daylight photos taken around the Continental Divide. On the night of April 8th, 90 flash photos were taken between 1 a.m. and 4 a.m. These photos were puzzling and eerie, showing various items such as their belongings spread out on rocks, a plastic bag tied to a twig on a rock, a candy wrapper on a rock, a mirror, the back of Kris's head, and more. Many suspected that the seemingly random pictures were taken in order to use the flash as a source of light in the dark. Further searches in the area where the backpack was found led to the discovery of additional remains. In August 2014, a boot with a foot inside and a pelvic bone were found, along with several scattered bones. DNA tests confirmed that these remains belonged to Kris Kremers and Lisanne Froon. The state of the remains varied, with some bones appearing bleached and others with bits of skin still attached. This suggested different rates of decomposition and possible exposure to various environmental factors. There have been so many theories regarding what really happened to the duo after they disappeared. One widely accepted theory is that they got lost while hiking the Pianista Trail and ultimately succumbed to the elements. The trail, while popular, becomes treacherous beyond the Continental Divide, where it is less marked and more challenging to navigate. The initial call attempts to emergency services from both women's phones on the afternoon of April 1st, mere hours after starting their hike, suggest they realized that they were in trouble relatively early on. on. These calls failed to connect due to poor reception. Phone records indicate numerous attempts to contact emergency services and sporadic attempts to turn on the phones to check for signals until the batteries died. This consistent but unsuccessful effort to reach help suggests a prolonged period of distress and survival attempts. The dense jungle, unpredictable weather, and difficult terrain would pose significant challenges for anyone lost in the area. Hypothermia, dehydration, and injury are plausible causes of death in such conditions. The state of decomposition and scattering of their remains could be attributed to natural processes, animal activity, and environmental exposure over time. Another theory suggests that the women may have encountered foul play, potentially involving one or more individuals who either harmed them or moved their remains. Some of Kris's bones were found to be bleached, while Lisanne's bones still had some skin attached, indicating different rates of decomposition. This discrepancy suggests the possibility of external intervention, as natural bleaching typically requires prolonged sun exposure, which may not be consistent with the jungle environment where the bones were found. A chemical analysis of some bones revealed residues that might indicate the use of lime, which can accelerate decomposition and is not naturally present in significant quantities in the area. Then there are the incorrect password entries on Kris's iPhone after April 6th, suggesting that someone other than Kris, possibly Lisanne or an unknown third party, was trying to access the phone. This raises the possibility that the phone was in the hands of someone else after Kris was incapacitated. The backpack containing their belongings was found dry and undamaged, despite being discovered at the onset of the rainy season. This condition implies it might have been placed there later, possibly by someone familiar with the area. Moreover, the location of the backpack had been previously searched, suggesting it may have been moved or deliberately placed where it could be found. Another possibility is that the women may have been attacked by wild animals. The dense jungle of Panama is home to various predators, including jaguars and snakes. While this theory could explain the scattering of bones and their condition, it is less supported by the available evidence. The bones recovered showed no clear signs of animal predation, such as bite marks or scratches that would typically be present if the women had been attacked by animals. Additionally, the presence of some bones with skin still attached contradicts the typical behavior of scavengers that would have likely stripped the bones clean. On the night of June 11, 1962, 3 prisoners escaped from a high-security prison on Alcatraz Island. They built a makeshift boat from stolen raincoats and officially they were never found, but many, including the families of the escapees, think they got away that night and have been hiding for a very long time. The leader of the group was Frank Morris, a man who led a tough childhood. His parents left him when he was 11 and he got into trouble early on, facing his first criminal charge at the age of 13. As a teenager, he kept getting arrested for robbing and involving himself in illegal substances. Frank was serving a 10-year sentence for robbing a bank when the escape happened. Frank had a number of partners during the escape: the Anglin brothers, John and Clarence, and Alan West. The Anglins grew up in a big family that traveled around the country doing farm work. They were extremely poor, and at a young age, they started getting into trouble. Their first run-in with the law was at just 14 years old when they broke into a service station. As they got older, they turned to robbing banks and other businesses. They were sentenced to 35 years for robbing the Columbia Savings Bank in Alabama. After trying to escape multiple times from Atlanta Penitentiary, they were moved to Alcatraz in 1960. The third member, Alan West, was a repeat offender. He had been arrested more than 20 times before finally being put in prison for stealing a car in 1955. After trying to escape from there as well, he ended up in Alcatraz in 1957. When the 4 men found themselves in Alcatraz together, they already knew each other well from serving time in other prisons. Once they were placed in cells next to each other, they came up with a plan to escape. Frank Morris led the group in a plan to dig through the walls of their cells, make a raft, and get away by sea. They gathered discarded saw blades from the prison workshops and metal spoons from the dining hall. Using the motor from a vacuum cleaner, they created a drill. Their makeshift tools were used to widen the holes around the ventilation ducts under the sinks in their cells. To hide their work from the guards, they covered the holes with painted strips of cardboard. To make the noise of drilling into the unguarded utility corridor behind their cells, Morris played his accordion during the daily music hour in the prison. Once the holes were large enough for them to squeeze through, the men transformed the empty upper level of their cell block into a makeshift workshop. In this space, they crafted the raft for their escape and also fashioned life jackets. These items were ingeniously made from raincoats that were either stolen or donated. The men carefully stitched them together and sealed the seams by melting the rubber using hot pipes in their workshop. To conceal their absence during their workshop sessions, the men came up with a pretty clever plan. They created papier-mâché replicas of their heads using soap, dust, toilet paper, and toothpaste. To make the heads appear realistic, they used paint from the maintenance workshop and real human hair collected from the prison barbershop floor. Placed on their pillows, these fake heads gave the illusion that the prisoners were sound asleep in their beds. Meanwhile, they were up on the top level constructing a 6 by 14 foot rubber raft and paddles from wooden scraps and stolen screws. Finally, on the night of June 11th, 1962, the raft was ready, and it was time to put the plan into action. Unfortunately for Alan West, his escape hopes were dashed when he realized the cement he had used to reinforce the concrete around the vent had hardened, blocking his passage through the hole that he had created. By the time he managed to widen the hole again, his accomplices had already left. Disheartened, he returned to bed. Meanwhile, Frank and the two Anglin brothers executed their escape by climbing a ventilation shaft to reach the prison roof. Their breakout nearly failed when they made a loud noise while breaking out of the shaft, but fortunately, the guards who heard it chose not to investigate. With a clear path to freedom, the three men used kitchen pipes to descend 50 feet to the ground and climbed over two 12-foot barbed wire perimeter fences. They made their way to a shore on the northeast part of the island, avoiding searchlights. The group brought along a concertina which was stolen from another inmate and modified it so that it could be used to inflate the raft. And just around 10 o'clock, they were ready to set sail. Their plan was to get to Angel Island. Alarms did not go off until the next morning when guards tried to wake the three prisoners but found dummy heads in their cells instead. A massive search operation began involving both civilian and military forces covering land, air, and sea around Alcatraz Island for the next 10 days. On June 14th, the Coast Guard found one of the prisoners' paddles off the south coast of Angel Island. On the same day, workers discovered a wallet with details of the Anglin brothers. 6 days later, shredded rubber believed to be from the prisoner's raft washed up near the Golden Gate Bridge. The following day, a deflated life jacket was found floating 50 yards from Alcatraz Island by a prison boat. These scattered remnants were the only things ever found related to the escape. Even though no bodies were recovered, the FBI concluded that the three men had drowned. Ever since the day the prisoners escaped, people have made it known that they do not agree with the FBI, saying that they're dead. Back in Christmas 1962, the Anglin family got cards and postcards from the brothers. The mom got flowers every year without knowing who sent them until she passed away in 1973. At her funeral, two tall guys with heavy makeup showed up, and the family thinks that it was John and Clarence. In 1989, Robert Anglin, one of the other brothers, said two men came to see their dad's dead body. They stayed, cried a bit, and then left. In that same year, two women told Unsolved Mysteries they saw Clarence Anglin and Frank Morris on a farm in Florida, but no one found them later on. Over the years, many people who aren't part of the Anglin family have claimed that they saw or spoke to the three guys who escaped. A day after they disappeared, a local San Francisco police officer said he saw a boat near Alcatraz Island that turned around and went under the Golden Gate Bridge after a few minutes. The FBI checked it out but didn't find it credible. Also in 1962, a guy named Bud White claimed to be Frank Morris's cousin. He claimed that he worked for Frank and even bribed some Alcatraz guards, then met Frank in a park in San Diego a few days after the escape. Bud White's daughter later said she was at that meeting, but there's no proof to support this claim. In 1993, there were additional claims, but this time with fresh evidence. A former inmate from Alcatraz named Thomas Kent told America's Most Wanted that he played a part in planning the escape, but opted out because he couldn't swim. He mentioned that the girlfriend of one of the Anglin brothers picked them up and drove them to Mexico. However, skepticism arose about Kent's account as he had received payment from the TV network for his confession. During the same year, a different individual named John Leroy Kelly asserted that he had taken the prisoners in a boat and then killed them to pocket the $40,000 collected by their families. Kelly disclosed all of this information on his deathbed and even provided a location where he claimed the bodies of the 3 men were buried. However, subsequent searches yielded no evidence of remains. In 2018, the FBI acknowledged receiving a letter supposedly written by John Anglin. In the letter, John claimed that his brother Clarence as well as Frank Morris had passed away. He expressed willingness to surrender in exchange for medical treatment. However, the FBI couldn't verify if the letter was genuine, and they never heard from the writer ever again. The FBI officially closed the case in 1979, but the U.S. Marshal Service plans to keep it open until 2030, when all the men would be over 100 years old.